Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets. Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove Live with 3/4 of the Mets Roundtable. Hopefully, everybody is doing okay, and I know everybody's so excited about all the breaking news that's been happening with the New York Mets. I mean, we can't even get any sleep because of all the breaking news. I mean, Nelson, Chris, we're up 24/7 giving you all the news, except nothing's going on. So, unfortunately for all of us, we have to come up with topics. We have to complain, bitch, and moan about over-unders, projections, rotation outlooks, Mike Vasil, maybe a DH, maybe some bullpen. I think I saw Nelson warming up in the snow to see if he can get a bullpen start. Like, this is where we are right now. This is where we are right now, but guess what? We're kind of good at our jobs. I mean, they are. I don't know about me, but they're great at it. But we're going to have to try to make it interesting for you guys today. And I do apologize for being a ghost basically the last couple of days. I was sick as the dog for the last couple of days. Couldn't do my prospects video. Couldn't go live. It sucked. But those guys held it down as always. So let's say what up to Nelson and Chris. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Rob. You deserve a couple of sick days here and there with how hard you work on your channel, man. Take a breather. Hope you're feeling better. And you didn't miss much. None of us in the chat missed much. We're here to talk about a couple of relatively new reports, but nothing too serious right now. It just seems like the Mets are sort of continuing to check in on everybody and anybody, but nothing really materialistic coming of that. But like I said, subscribe to the channel. CP New York Sports, you know where to find me. Subscribe to the channel for more Mets talk. Appearing on 3 Mets podcasts. Nelson and I do the Interstate Mets Report show, True Mets Talk podcast as well. I appreciate everyone being here. It's always great to talk Mets baseball in a new week in the offseason on Monday. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. Nelson, how you doing, buddy? Staying in that snow?
Yeah, it's actually starting to warm up finally. It's the weather out here has been as cold as the so-called hot stove. It's crap. Aroldis Chapman just signed with the Pirates, by the way. So that's another. It seems like almost every time we get connected to somebody in some way or another, they end up signing somewhere else within a couple hours. So that's just continues that trend. Not that I wanted Aroldis Chapman, by the way. It's funny to me that his name came up like a couple hours ago with the Mets, and now he's a Pirate. So I get to see him down in Pittsburgh. Yay! Not really, but whatever. So yeah, man, good to be here. Good to talk whatever it is we're going to talk about. There really is not much, but it'll be a good time. Thanks everybody for watching, and if you haven't already, please jump over to the channel and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. So yeah, Chapman to the Pirates. So we already know during trade deadline he will be traded because that's what the Pirates do. So that was that's the opportunity for the Mets. We'll get into the bullpen in a little bit, but yeah, the DH. Here we go again. Right? We talk about it a little bit. We hear nothing, and then all of a sudden Martinez pops up in a Sports Illustrated article. Again, believe what you guys want to believe. That is obviously solely up to everybody here in the chat and you guys as well. I don't even know what to think anymore. Give me a freaking DH, please. Can you just say, okay, it's going to be Vientos and call it a day if you really want to do that? I have no problem with, having a plan, sticking to it, and saying what it is instead of beating around the bush. But I truly think the Mets are going to get a DH because I think David Stearns has been, if he hasn't been anything else, he's been honest and he's been very truthful from I feel like what he's saying. And he's kind of beat around the bush a little bit. He went back and forth, talking about in-house with DH about a couple of weeks ago, and only recently in his last interview when he was in the Dominican Republic, he was talking about, yeah, we're still looking at DH possibilities. So he's not really straightforward on that aspect like he is on other aspects of the team, like third base, like the rotation, stuff like that. So I'm going to start with you, Nelson, with this DH situation. Do you really think they're going to get a DH at this point? Because every now and then, it just seems like I don't know if they're comfortable with Vientos or anybody else that's in house. It just feels that way because Stearns has been beating around the bush with this, Nelson. So where do you think the Mets are, and where do you think they're going to go? And like, do you believe any of this nonsense, rumor wise, with the DH?
Maybe at this point I'm just being a Debbie Downer because I'm just tired of all of it. But I honestly, I think the Mets roster is what it is, and that's what we're going to spring training with. Like that's what it feels like, anyways. I mean, they might sign somebody, but if I had to put money on it, I'd put money on Mark Vientos and DJ Stewart are your DH, and we're not signing anybody. I just, I mean, we haven't done anything. Nothing's going on. Anytime a rumor comes up, it fades away pretty quick. Like, I don't know. I really think the Mets are content to not spend any more money, not spend any more on the tax than they already have to. And this is your roster, and Mark Vientos, come on down, and here's hoping he can be better than Daniel Vogelbach.
Well, that's all we can hope for, right? I mean, can it be much worse? I mean, Vogelback was basically non-existent as a DH. He was just hard to miss. But because he didn't do anything with the bat except look at balls right down the middle and try to take walks, and a guy in a position where we need him to do is hit, and he can't even do that. So we hope if that's the case, if it's a DJ Stewart Vientos combination, it sounds pretty, it sounds nice. It won't make a lot of Met fans excited, maybe some. But it can't be that much worse. I mean, the Mets basically had nothing at the DH spot for a couple of years now. I mean, they tried to experiment with Dominic Smith and JD Davis. That was a disaster. They tried it with Vogelback and Ruff and a little bit of Nate Quinn as well. It really didn't work out at all. And they've still been trying to find it and trying to, prove a point with Vogelback. And now it seems like Stearns might be going in the in-house direction, but there's rumors that it might not be true. Who knows? So, Chris, what is your thoughts about these latest hogwash rumors from the DH situation? And do you think it's just going to be Vientos and company at this point?
Yeah, I think it's going to go internal. I think it's going to be internal. I don't foresee the Mets having any sort of offensive upgrades. I think the most that we see for the rest of the offseason, objectively speaking, is going to be a bullpen piece, and that's about it. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, everything that David Stearns has said, I know he's beat around the bush in terms of not committing to the internal route, but I really do think we see a platoon of Stewart and Mr. Vientos for what it's worth. I know that's not what everyone wants. On the Interstate Mets report with Nelson last Friday, we went over some Vientos projections. They're projecting him somewhere between 245 to 245. I think they had him at 14 or 15 home runs. I could be mistaken there, a couple, give or take a couple there. But regardless, it is, to Nelson's credit and to Nelson's point when we were talking about that conversation, very Vogelback number right, from Vientos in terms of what Fangraphs is projecting him at. So I don't think that we do anything drastic there. I've been making my case all season long on why I think Justin Turner is the perfect fit for this team. But regardless, I just don't think that we see anything here materialize, for better or for worse. And we were trying to play around with the Mets' lineup in terms of maybe a revamp type lineup. I suggested Lindor for the sake of just doing something different than last year. Could potentially bat leadoff, but then you have to figure out where to put Nimmo. We'll talk about Nimmo's projections here later. But yeah, the DH has been a topic that we've been discussing here time and time again. There's only so many things, so many new things to say, right? I mean, I understand the JD Martinez report that you mentioned about Sports Illustrated? Are we really going to believe what Sports Illustrated has to say about what the Mets are doing? And it is just something to say for having a topic up here and just talking about it. So, of course, the Mets would like love a DH. We would love a DH as Mets fans, right? In terms of winning the most ball games in 2024 and maximizing this roster's potential, but it's just not going to happen. And if I'm wrong about that, then I would be gladly wrong about that because this team obviously needs that fifth hole type batter. And I think Justin Turner's perfect. Jorge Soler is not going to, I know there's a lot of steam on Jorge Soler's name. He's just not going to bring down his asking price. I feel like he opted out of his deal with the Marlins for a reason. And that the asking price is just not going to come down. So, and JD Martinez, let's not forget, he's coming off of back-to-back All-Star seasons. Like, we're not going to get JD Martinez for pennies on the dollar either. So that doesn't really fit the Mets' MO. And something that we'll talk about with the bullpen moves here next is that Andy Martino, really, the way he's wording these things, and I know that we don't like to take Andy Martino report, with too much grain of salt, or we do take it with a grain of salt, I should say. But he's saying the Mets bullpen, like, they're going to sign a body for the bullpen if they see fit. So we might not even get a bullpen piece at this rate, according to his report. So we'll see how they play it out. I'm ready to talk projections at this point instead of the offseason signings. But like I said, stranger things have happened. Maybe the Mets are really holding something close, to themselves and trying to get that bat. But we don't know what these agents are asking for. Justin Turner might be asking for a 2-year deal as opposed to a 1-year deal. We just don't know. And it's a shame. But I think Vientos has the potential, just to end this topic on the DH and my thoughts on it. I truly do think Vientos has the opportunity to hit 20-plus home runs if he's given an ample opportunity this season. I think his pop is severely underrated. Obviously, he's going to strike out a lot. He's going to strike out at over a 30% clip, which you don't want to see out of anybody, your DH or any young player coming up. But it's something to be said for having insane metrics in terms of your exit velocity and barrel percentage on your Savant page. And those are going to automatically lead to home runs. But is it going to the Mets over the top in terms of being that wild card team? Only time will tell. So we'll see.
Yeah, and you just brought up Fangraphs. When it came to Vientos, what was it? 240s, 14, 15 home runs. Again, Vogelback numbers. It's like, I wonder how they're putting that aspect of like projections. Is it because he hasn't played enough games to say, oh well, this is probably what we can see him doing if he plays this many games. I think it's just based off the limited amount of play he has. We know he has the power. We know he strikes out a lot. I don't know if he can hit for average. Again, I would take 25. If he bats 240, I need 25 home runs for you at least. I mean, that's at least 10, 11 more home runs than we had last offseason or last season with the everyday DH, which is basically Vogelback. So I don't really understand what they're trying to do with the DH situation. Again, am I going to complain about Vientos? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I can't change anything if it happens, but I mean, I'm going to be rooting for Vientos, homegrown guy. It would be nice. He shows flashes every now and then, but when he gets into that little slump, can he get out of it? Because we've seen it with Beatty. He'll have like a few good games and then he just completely falls apart. And that's the difference between AAA and the major leagues. You're a quadruple A player or you're a major leaguer. And we really don't know basically for two positions in third base and the DH situation. And that worries me with the situation that we're in right now. And that's why I think the Mets need a DH. Like, give me somebody. I honestly, at this point, I don't care who it is. Is it Martinez? Great. Woohoo, I'll have fun. Is it Turner? I'll be a little bit more happy. Is it Soler? Great. We got a ton of power. But if we go into the season with Vientos, my problem is that you're going into the season basically it's a hit or miss. If he fails, we're back where we started with the DH, and we got to try somebody else. That person might not work out, and that's only going to hurt the team. And if you're going to say you're going to be competitive, you're going to try to make them. You want to be. This team is a playoff team, as Stern says. Then you're not really trying enough at certain positions. Now, you can say what you want about the rotation. I've seen Stern deal with rotations and put guys in that from the minors, and I know they had Burns and Woodruff, But other guys, the Peraltas of the world, his bullpen that he just throws shit at the wall and see what sticks. It works. He does something right. So it's hard to me to kill him for rotation and bullpen when he's been one of the best front office people putting pitching staffs together, and it's been working. I think over the last 6 years out of the 8 as GM, he had top 5 ERAs in pitching staff, in bullpen, and in starter ERAs. So it's hard to kill him on that aspect. But with this aspect, I just don't know where he's going. Are you looking for power? Are you looking for what are you looking for from Vientos? Are you just looking for power, or are you looking for a combination of things? Because if you're looking for just power, that's a Soler. Most likely, that's a Soler, I would think. Are you looking for a combination of average and power? That could be either Martinez or Turner. So that's where I don't understand where he's going. And in my case, it seems confusing to me what he's trying to do here, because everybody sees the DH as something different, right? In the Phillies case, they like power from Schwarber. They don't care about the average. In the Mets case, we never really had a DH, so we don't know what the hell we really need. Everybody believes we need more power in this lineup, which is true, but you can't have a guy bat 230 and hit 25 home runs, because after those 25 home runs, he's not doing much else at the DH spot. And I think a well-rounded hitter is more important at the DH situation, in my opinion. That's why, like Chris said, Justin Turner is probably the perfect guy. Again, Martinez, was pretty good. What he had, 279 with 35 home runs. I mean, well, I'll take that, but that's why I think Justin Turner is more of a guy that if he lacks power, he still can hit for average, and I think that's going to help the team a little bit more. All right, bullpen. We just heard about I was going to say Matt Chapman. Aroldis Chapman signed with the Pirates. Of course, that's going to be I don't know what the deal was. I haven't looked at it, but I'm assuming it's going to be a 1-year deal. Probably an easy tradable deal, a contract for the Pirates just to get some assets back at the deadline. We all know that whoever's contending needs a bullpen arm. We'll probably look to get Aroldis Chapman. Again, a few hours ago, we heard the Mets were in on him, and then they weren't. So apparently the Pirates beat us out in the money wise. So yay. Bullpen targets, Nelson. Are they going to go with this bullpen and not get another lefty, or get somebody that we never heard of? Like, this is getting a little frustrated now, and I'm getting pissed off. Again, nobody's signing. I mean, you got 2 top pitchers on the market still available. You got a ton of bullpen arms that we know names of on the market still. So it's not like the Mets are letting all these players go to other teams and not signing anybody. A lot of players are still out there. So, Nelson, what the hell is going on with this bullpen? Please help me.
What's going on is David Stearns is building a bullpen based on minor league signings, hoping one of them or 2 of them or 3 of them come out of it and pitch their lights out and have a career year. Like, he likes these fastball slider pitchers. He doesn't want to spend money on any of them. He'd rather just take a flyer on a 1-year minor league deal. And it is what it is. I honestly don't, at this point, this could be me being a Debbie Downer, but I just don't see them getting anybody. They don't want to give anything more than a 1-year deal. They don't want to spend a lot of money. Chapman got $10.5 million for 1 year. Obviously, I guess they thought that was too much. Honestly, I didn't want Chapman, so I'm glad. But still, I don't see it. I see this is going to be the team. Maybe another minor league signing or 2, but I don't know. I want to be wrong, but so far I've been. I can't figure this guy out. Like, I don't mind going with a ragtag bullpen, because bullpens are all over the place every year anyways. I honestly did think that at some point we were going to get a big move out of him, because I figured he'd want to, like, make a big splash at some point, but I guess that splash was going to be Yamamoto, and after that didn't happen, then that was it. Like, that was his guy. He didn't get him, so we don't get shit. And I still think, regardless, I think he made enough minor improvements that this team can still win around 80 games, maybe get lucky, win 82, 83, 84, but it's not pretty. It's not what I don't think any fan really wanted. We'll be real here, but it is what it is. I don't think we're getting anybody. I just don't. At this point, I've given up. I've thrown up my hands. I've given up. David Stearns, you know what the hell you're doing. I don't get paid 10 million bucks. So if you're just gonna go with what we got, then more power to you. And I'll be glad to be pleasantly surprised if we do get somebody. But at this point, I don't see. I think the roster we have is the roster you're going to see in spring, and let them all battle it out and see what happens.
Yeah, it seeming to look like that. And again, it's hard to kill Stearns, because he knows he does magic with the pitching staffs. I don't know how he does it, and like you said, bullpens are fickle. I mean, you can have a great bullpen, like the Mets had, a really good bullpen in 2022, and it was a lot of the same names, minus Diaz, obviously, but it was mostly a lot of the same names that weren't as good either. So it is very interesting to see. Again, he's done a really good job with the Brewers with the bullpen, and I know Lopez. He had a great year a couple of years ago with the Orioles, and you hope you get that lightning in a bottle. And a lot of these guys, when it comes to bullpen, it's usually they lose control. They have problems with walks, and that's usually what is a problem with a relief pitcher that was good at one time and not good the next. It's usually because of control issues. And if David Stearns says, with the pitching lab and the way, he said he talked a lot about Luis Severino about tipping pitches, and they believe that they found something in that situation. It wasn't his stuff. His stuff is there, but when you tip pitches, you could throw 110. The batter's gonna hit the ball over the wall. Like if you know what's coming, and early on in the in your windup, you're going to be in trouble. So we'll have to wait and see. So Chris, bullpen wise, I know we got Lopez, I know we got Raley, I know we got Diaz back, and that should help. Even if Lopez is around the 4 ERA, it's probably not as bad as what we had. And I think he can be better than that because he's shown that. And do you have the trust of the David Stearns, I guess, analytics, or the David Stearns way of doing things, and how he figures these guys out somehow, some way, and thinks they have something in these pitchers, like a Lopez who had a down season but had an excellent season for the Orioles a couple of years ago. What do you, if the Mets aren't going to get anybody, and if you do, say it. Do you believe in Stearns when it comes to the bullpen? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I believe in Stearns. I think his sample size in terms of putting together that competent bullpen that we've been talking about all offseason long is something that he can definitely bring over here to Queens. I don't see why it wouldn't be the same case. I mean, we've seen the sample size in terms of the depth pieces. Listen, we're not going to go out there and sign guys like Aroldis Chapman for the front of the bullpen. And I'm talking about like your fifth, sixth inning type guys. Like that's why we go out there and sign guys like an Austin Adams or a Kyle Crick. And I like those guys' stuff. Like Austin Adams had one of his best seasons in 2021, I believe, is with the Padres at the time. He's got a wicked slider. So I think that if you get with the coaching staff and you sort of hone in those pitches and get them in that lab that they've been stressing about for the last couple of years, I think that you can definitely see an improvement and a change. And the same thing goes for the starting rotation. This is not just limited to the bullpen. A guy like Jorge Lopez, we're talking about, who struggled, right? Was an elite closer with the Orioles, struggled when he got traded to the Twins, I believe. And he went to the World Baseball Classic, I believe, for Team Puerto Rico, and he did pretty well, right? So he's got this stuff still. He's not washed. And I know the bullpen on paper doesn't look like what we all imagine it should be, right? Especially with Diaz coming back. We want that elite eighth inning setup man. And I'm not saying that the Mets don't need that, because they still do. I've been an advocate for a guy like Hector Neris all off season long. I've been an advocate for Robert Stevenson all off season long before he just recently went to the Angels. There's been bullpen pieces, specifically eighth inning guys, that I've been advocating for, but it just doesn't seem like the Mets are willing to go out there this off season and get those type of guys. I think it's a shame And I'm not saying that we're not going to see that for the rest of the offseason, because I truly do think that the Mets this year specifically, with Edwin Diaz coming back from such an injury and not pitching on a mound for in a game for over a year, that he is going to need to have some pressure relieved from him in the 8th inning, right? By whoever sets, him up. And he's not going to be able to come in for 4-out saves, 5-out saves like he was in 2022. So I think that it's a very big gamble if you're relying on a Rayleigh to be that shutdown guy. Because as much as I like Rayleigh, and his statistics over the last couple of years have been pretty decent, right? I think he had a pretty decent season last season for the Mets. He's not a shutdown 8th inning guy, and a guy that I fully trust to go out there and set our elite closer up. So I think it is what it is. I don't trust in Jorge Lopez to have that rejuvenated season to be that guy either. I think when you talk about your 5th, 6th, 7th inning guys, that's a clear class of its own versus your 8th and 9th inning guys. Like, those are your shutdown. Ball game should be over when those two guys hit the mound. So, like I said, it is a gamble because of Edwin Diaz's injury. And I'm not saying that I don't trust in Edwin Diaz, but all things considered, when you take a look at the situation, what version of Edwin Diaz are we going to get back? I'm sure he's going to do phenomenally. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's got extra time, right? The Mets didn't pitch him and rush him back into the last offseason or last season toward the tail end for no reason. But I just don't know at this point. The Mets haven't shown any sort of commitment or willingness to commit, for better or for worse. And everybody's saying in the chat here, and I completely agree with them. I mean, John said it here in the chat, 78 to 82 wins is the range that we're looking at. That's the range that I'm looking at. I'll say probably 80 flat. I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it is what it is at this point. I think that the bullpen's going to be better off than we understand. And I think this roster right now, as it currently stands, is going to be better off than we're currently giving it credit for. But I would be very... I have to call myself a homer to go out there and say that the Mets are missing a few pieces, because they definitely are, right? The bat we're missing, and Paul asked in the chat not to go back to the DH, but he said, what would be an acceptable number for Mark Vientos this season? Listen, if Mark Vientos goes out there and hits 22 home runs and hits 240 in a platoon role with DJ Stewart, I'm happy with that. Because that's progression over 20 home runs. That's what he's known for, is a power. So give us a power. But yeah, they're missing a bat. They're missing a bullpen piece. And honestly, with the rotation, we'll talk about it here too. Unless a prospect comes up like Mr. Vasil, that rotation also is a very big question mark. So there's a lot of question marks and a lot of things that have to go right for this Mets team in order to even get to that 80 to 82 wins and that back in the wild card. And like I said, would I put a mortgage payment down in terms of betting for the Mets to appear in the playoffs right now if the roster is currently going to stay as it is? No, absolutely not. But I think that the ceiling of this team, right, the max potential of this type roster would be a back-end wild card spot. And I know it's really frustrating to come on here every single Monday and all of our channels respectively to come talk about the same things. And I understand the frustration, not only on our side, but also everybody listening in side as well. It's frustrating to see something like that come full circle and waiting for that 2025 season, or off season, I should say. But at this point, I mean, what else do we really have to go off of at this point? I mean, we have Andy Martino's reports, and we have a new report coming out every single day that the Mets are interested in XYZ, but with no real interest to sort of go and sign that player like we just saw with Chapman, right? We saw Andy Martino quite literally, like 4 or 5 hours ago, talk about Aroldis Chapman and a potential fit with the Mets, and the Mets have been in contact with this camp. And then not only 3 to 4 hours later, he signed to the Pirates for $10.5 million. So it just seems like it's going to be that type of offseason. And honestly, back to your main question, as my full circle answer, yeah, I still do believe in David Stearns to get this ship right. We don't know what sort of constraints that Steve Cohen himself might have put on this offseason. Do I think David Stearns is running the ship by himself, right? I think that Steve Cohen did hand the reins off to David Stearns. So whatever we're seeing out of this offseason is definitely David Stearns', I guess, genius or lack thereof, however you want to talk about the Mets in whatever sort of light. But I think that there is an overarching plan, and you either have the patience for it or you don't. That's about it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think, nobody cares if we don't have patience, right? The fact of the matter is, the guy who's making the decisions has the patience. And I know it pisses a lot of people off. But again, a lot of the same people that are pissed off are the same people who wanted to get rid of Epler and wanted to get rid of Showalter. And when you change regimes, you don't have a new regime come in and make major changes to lineups or rosters in general. It just doesn't work like that. Like, it just doesn't. And, he's in evaluation mode, unfortunately for us. But we're also pissed off because we had a shit season in 2023. 2022 ended in a disaster. And, we're on pins and needles right now. And I think that's the problem. So if, maybe if Met fans didn't complain, maybe Billy Epler and Buck Showalter would have still been here for one more year, or at least Buck Showalter, and maybe it would have been a little bit more of a status quo. But you're going to have major changes when you change up an entire, front office and manager, and they have new ideas. They like who they like. They like different prospects. You never know. But yeah, we have to trust Stearns. There's no reason not to trust him at this point. And anybody thinks that he's like Will Ponce 2.0, small market GM, what you heard Joe B say on WFN or a couple of others, it's a joke, right? There's no Stearns already said it. There's no reason why to overspend on a player they don't believe in. I just don't understand why people get mad at that. Like, there's people in the chat right now that can't stand a player that we might be talking about. Say there's a lot of people that might not like JD Martinez. Why are you going to give him, say if he wants $50 million, why are you going to give him $50 million when I don't like him? Yeah, you might not like him. We might not like him, but David Stearns might like him. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And I don't like a team that doesn't believe in a player fall to the pressure and say, oh, we got to sign somebody. And David Stearns said it. We're not just going to sign somebody to win over headlines and make fans happy. That's not the point. The point is to win ball games. And just because we don't believe that this team can be a 90-win team doesn't mean that they don't think so. Doesn't mean the players don't think so. We got to remember, we had no rotation last year at all. There was not one time all season that the rotation that was supposed to start at its opening day start one time around the rotation, one time all season. And we forget about that. And that's with a down year, a non-existent year from Marte, a down year from McNeil, a down year average-wise for Alonso. Canna, Escobar wasn't the same as they were in 2022. You had Beatty come up. You had Alvarez come up. So there was a lot of moving parts along with down seasons from a lot of guys. And on top of that, the rotation was nowhere to be found and were never healthy. And we look at it, and that was with Senga getting better later in the season. And you saw what happened when Quintana came back with just Quintana and Senga, that it kind of calmed the craziness down. And at least 2 out of your 5 starters you can trust every 5th day. And I think, and you saw, even though in September the games really didn't matter for the Mets, but it mattered for a lot of the teams that they faced. And the Mets actually did pretty well in September against those teams that were trying for a wild card spot or playoff spots. And I think we forget that you don't need 4 or 5 guys to go out there every 5th day and be so damn good. If you got 2 or 3 guys out of your 5 pitching every 5th day and giving your team a chance to win, you're going to be in a lot more ball games, and you're going to win a couple of ball games that you probably would have lost last year when you had to take out a pitcher in the 3rd inning. Remember, the Mets didn't go past the 6th inning until the middle of May last year. That can't happen again. If that happens, we're going to be looking at a bad season again. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at it, and David Stearns believes in what he's doing. And we may not believe it, but let's be honest. It doesn't matter what we believe. We talk about it. We bitch about it. If they believe, if the players believe, that's all that really matters when they get on the field. So speaking of the pitching, Mike Vasil, and I'm going to give credit to Chris here because he was the one that brought up we should have a conversation because a lot of Met fans are down on him. I was just looking at his stats right now. He had in combined a 4.65 ERA. He was very good in AA, struggled in AAA with, let me see how many games did he start. He started 16 games in AAA and 10 in AA. So 26 starts in total. And he struggled in AAA. Now, whatever you want to say to that, I think AA is better than AAA, but he did struggle at the next higher level. So, Nelson, I'm going to start with you here with Mike Vasil. 124 innings, 138 strikeouts, and 46 walks, but overall 4.79 ERA. What do you think the struggle was from Double A to Triple A when he looked like he pitched better in Double A, where the better talent is? What do you think, Nelson?
Who knows? I mean, anytime you switch up and go up in the minor leagues from one level to the next, it's obviously an adjustment period. Could have been a little bit of fatigue. You got a guy pitching late into the season. He's not used to pitching that many innings. That could have played a factor in it as well. I mean, it's not like I don't think Vasil was ever projected to be like some sort of ace. Let's be honest. He's a guy that, if you're lucky, can be a 3 or 4 in your rotation.
Yes.
And I think I mean, I get why people have soured on him a bit, but I honestly think, given some tweaks, like he can probably outpitch Tyler McGill and David Peterson and guys like that. So I mean, I could be off base, but I really, it's not like it's that hard. Those guys weren't that good. So I don't know. I don't think it's fair to just totally give up on the guy. We've seen guys with worse stuff do better. Like he's got some these. He's probably needs another pitch, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. He's good. He's okay. I don't think he's gonna. I don't see him making a rotation out of spring.
Yeah.
But I do see. I could see him up like relatively early. It depends on how the rest of these guys do, right? Like, is Severino gonna be crap from the start? Is Hauser gonna be all right? How's Mania gonna pitch? So, do we go 5 or 6 man rotation? We haven't nailed that down yet. If it's only a 5 man rotation, then he's probably less likely to be up. But if it's a 6 man, he's probably battling it out for that last spot.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't think he's going to be a huge game changer. I think if there's a guy in the minors that is that game changer for us, it's Christian Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, he's a little further away, but I do think we do see Scott at some point later in the season. But Vasil, I still like the kid. I still think he can, like I said, I still think he can outpitch McGill. I think he can outpitch Peterson. I think he can get you some wins where maybe you didn't expect them. So obviously, listen, the point here is David Stearns sees something in these guys, right? Because if he didn't, he would have gone out and gotten more pitching. I do believe that. If he didn't think that he had something cooking in the minors with some of these pitchers, he would have had to get somebody else, because next year's rotation is Kodai Senga, and that's pretty much it. So he's, to me, the fact that he's not getting anybody that will pitch beyond 2024 for the Mets tells me that he thinks he has something cooking in the minors with at least one of these guys, because to go in the next year with just one starter on the books is a little crazy. Like, let's be real. But at this point, it is what it is. The only other thing that could happen that is, I guess, a possibility. I mean, these guys aren't signing, right? So maybe their market's crater. Maybe you get Blake Snell decides to take a 1, 2, 3 year deal. I don't see it. It's probably not likely, but I mean, crazier things have happened. We get into February and nobody's signing these guys. Maybe they say, you know what, I'll take a 1 year deal on a crazy AAV and let's try this again next year. Who knows? I don't know. But at this point, it is very odd to me that so many guys are still on the table. So I don't know. That's my only Hail Mary hope that we improve this rotation, is that, or for that matter, the DH or bullpen, is that some of these guys just decide, you know what, nobody's giving me what I want, so I'm going to take a short-term deal, and the Mets can maybe pounce on it. But outside of that, this is why we're talking about Mike Vasil, right? And Mark Vientos and all that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm not down on the team. I think I'm just down on the situation and the fact that I was excited for this offseason and it just ended up being a total fucking dud. Pardon my language, but it's the truth. It just ended up being just so boring when I expected a little more. I didn't expect us to sign everybody, but I did expect a little more than this. So yeah, it is what it is. We are where we are, and hopefully we get some of these kids like outshining what we thought they could be.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, and you're right about that, Nelson. Like, to try to like spice up the off season, and it's going so slow and it's not moving at all, and they really haven't heard anything. It's kind of putting the damper on the off season, and it's like, how can you get excited about spring training games a month away and pitches and catches in 2.5 weeks when half these, almost a lot of teams besides the Dodgers, are the only team that seem like they have a set roster. And it's like, you don't even know, like by February 1st, we might have, a DH. We might have another pitcher. We don't. It's crazy to me, and I do think I think all these teams are just waiting to the last minute for these players to drop their prices, and that's when they're gonna pounce. And I guess that makes sense for the teams, but it pisses us off as fans because, like, it doesn't seem like anybody's trying to make a move. Everybody's just waiting and sitting back. The players are sitting back, waiting for their price to come up, and the team's waiting for the prices to drop. So it's a big hogwash of nonsense. But Mike Vasil and Christian Scott are already at spring training, which is nice to see. SNY posted it, which is nice to see. They're working on their game, which is always important. Again, Nelson, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say maybe they're all looking to sign with the Dodgers on an IOU contract, and I'll pay you $20 million in 2050.
Yeah, well, be careful. The California legislators are trying to go after that tax money from Otani. So be careful. Be careful what you wish for. Chris, Mike Vasil, you brought up the topic in the group chat, and I'm giving you credit on this one. So I already went over the numbers. I know you looked at it. You're very interested in Mike Vasil. I don't see him any better as a number 3 at the very high point, but he can definitely be a number 4 and 5, and that can help the rotation. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year or late into the season. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I completely agree with you. His upside probably is going to be a 4 or 5 in the rotation, which the Mets are going to need, to Nelson's point, and we've been saying it all offseason with how the rotation looks in 2025, right? If Manaea opts out of his deal, say he does well, wants to test free agency, Severino, maybe he doesn't do well, the Mets aren't interested in re-signing him. This rotation is going to need help from guys like Vasil and Christian Scott. Now, I think that, and barring a miracle, I think the assumption that we're all under is that Mike Vasil is a little bit further along the line in terms of being ready. He's 23 years old, and he's going to be a little bit more ready than Christian Scott in terms of making his MLB debut. I'll say this: how I view the Mets roster right now on paper going into the spring training, I think that they can surprise some people. I think, objectively speaking, do I think it's a stud roster? No. This is, you get what you pay for, and we got a bunch of guys that can maybe string together a back end playoff appearance. But what I do worry about, which is partly the reason why I want to bring the Mike Vasil conversation, is the depth of this team in multiple position categories, right? I think the front of the bullpen has probably the most depth, especially when you look at what's in the minor leagues, and all the depth pieces that the Mets have signed this offseason. But when you talk about the rotation, it gets interesting because it's like, well, what if a guy goes down? And I hate to just be that guy and talk about injuries, but I think it's a real thing to talk about when you're talking about the New York Mets, is injuries. And what happens if a guy goes down? Who's next in line? Are we going to go back to the old ways of hoping and praying that Tyler McGill puts it together? Or maybe a guy in Jose Buto that's probably already reached his ceiling? I hate to put that terminology and that marker on him in terms of, I just don't see anything else that we can get that's going to come of Jose Buto, right? I think he hit his ceiling. He did well last season. I'm interested in the Vasils and the Christian Scotts at that point, even if that means sooner rather than later, especially Mike Vasil. I think that a lot of people are definitely down on him. Saw some discourse on the timeline today as well. He does have a funky delivery. I will give everybody credit to that nature. He has a short delivery, a short stride. Shout out Edge. He was talking to me. Edge the Dawn, I think 32 on Twitter. He's always very knowledgeable about this kind of stuff as well, and I like to talk ball with him. But he was talking about how, when you have a short stride like that on the mound with Vasil, your arm lags and you have a potential for more injuries. And I think that also his stuff is just hit or miss as well. He has a very flat fastball from what I watch from Mike Vasil, but his off-speed movement's awesome, and that's where he gets the bulk of his strikeouts, which is great. He's got some pretty good put-away pitches, but can that remain consistent at the MLB level? That's what I don't know. And obviously, with his struggles in AAA, that is a little bit of a concerning indicator, but it's not the end all be all, like Nelson said. Like, I'm not going to sit here and write him off at the major league level because he struggled at the tail end of 2023 or what have you. So I think that we have something there in Mike Vasil. It's not going to be a 3-starter, right? We're going to have to go out there in 2025 and make a trade for that second or third guy in the rotation. We're going to have to pair that trade with a signing as well. Because even if you do have Vasil and Scott, you're still missing presumably two rotation pieces at the beginning of the 2025 season, right? So there's a lot of work left to be done here, but I think that not reaching on the guy this year is perfectly setting them up for maybe a trade and a free agent combo next offseason that they probably have already started to plan out. Like, let's be honest, the Mets don't go through with this type of offseason and just sit there and watch free agent after free agent after free agent sign with anybody else without having a plan for 2025. So I can bet you that David Stearns already knows, and that's probably obvious, right? I'm not breaking any news here in terms of that. That's part of having a plan in general. But he already knows, like, if there's a trade on the market that he likes, maybe he goes and hits the Brewers up. He's like, yeah, those guys are projected to stink in the NL Central with that division getting stronger. And I'm going to go after whoever I want in that rotation, right? Maybe he likes Freddie Peralta. Maybe he likes someone else that we don't even know about that the Mets are looking at. So I think that this is not a short-sighted sort of plan here. But Mike Vasil, if he is able to pan out and be that guy and at the next level with that put-away pitch and be that fourth or fifth option for the Mets, we're in great shape. We're in great shape. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I want to see how his fastball progresses too, because I think that I've seen a little bit of inconsistencies there. I saw him go up from 97 to 98. Then it gets dialed back down to like 93, 94. So I want to see a little bit more consistency there. But all in all, I think that we'll have a lot of better of a picture at the beginning of this season in terms of where he's at in the minor leagues, about a potential debut, if anyone should go down the rotation. And honestly, if you're looking for that sixth man and you don't know if that's going to be Joey Lucchesi, could be Mike Vasil if he impresses in spring training. So
Well, yeah, and a lot of people forget about 2022 and that how important the depth pieces were that kept us afloat and kept us where we needed to be until our guys got back. And the 101 win season wasn't because of all the big guys that were in the lineup or all the big guys that were in the rotation. It was a lot of depth pieces that helped this team stay afloat when the injuries happened and helped that team get to 101 wins. And you see it now with the depth pieces, what Stern's trying to do. And it's not just about injuries. It's just about if guys don't perform, you're getting replaced by somebody else right behind you. And I think that's important. And Stearns always did that with the Brewers. You didn't do your job, there was somebody else right behind you to replace you, either from the minors or on the bench. He always did that. They were not shy about going to the next person. I think the Mets' problem last year was giving a lot of players too much leash. And when they basically fell to the ground and just was garbage, complete garbage, then they finally made the move. Not when it was going bad and you just kept on watching it going slowly downhill until they crashed and burned. And that's when they made the move. I think what Stearns is going to do when things are not working out, and either obviously an injury, you got to replace them. But if things are not working out, statistical wise and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, you're going to get replaced by a bench piece or a minor league play. So it's going to be very interesting to see. So outlook. I'm going to give you guys the floor when it comes to rotation, outfield lineup. You can pick any or do a quick analysis of all three. Nelson, I'm going to start with you. What is the outlook do you see with all three of these, or just pick one that you think that can make the most impact for this team in 2024?
Oh man. I mean, the rotation is, let's be real, it's a lot of hope and pray. You're hoping and praying Severino pitches like the Severino of old and not the Severino of 2023. You're hoping and praying Sean Manaea is the second half of last year, Sean Manaea, and the whatever work he did in the pitching lab translates to the field. You're hoping and praying that Jose Quintana can stay healthy, which he hasn't proven to be in years past. You're hoping and praying that Kodai Senga doesn't have a sophomore slump, which I don't think he will, but it's something to consider, right? Like the one constant in the rotation that we all feel like we can rely on is Kodai Senga, but what if he has a down season? What if he has some adjustment issues? What if the book is out on him and major league hitters figure him out a little bit? Like it's a valid concern, right? So the rotation is a lot of hope, and really, to be honest, the lineup is too. If the lineup is what it is right now, and we don't get another bat, we're hoping for a lot. We're hoping for a Brett Beatty resurgence, that he somehow figures out how to translate what he did in the minor leagues to the major leagues, because he's been a great minor league ball player. You can't take that away from him. He was a very highly regarded prospect, but for whatever reason, granted, it is a small sample size. Let's not forget he's played less than a whole season's worth of games in his major league career. Yeah. But it hasn't translated yet, right? So you got to hope it does. And if it does, then yeah, that changes the outlook of the lineup a lot. Starling Marte, if Starling Marte can give you anywhere near what he gave you in 2022, then this team looks a lot better on paper than it did last year. But if he's last year's Starling Marte, if he's gotten old and he can't stay healthy, then we're in trouble, because I like Tyrone Taylor, but he's not an everyday outfielder. I like Harrison Bader. He's got a great glove. He doesn't have much of a bat, and he can't stay healthy. So we're hoping. It's a lot of hope, and it sucks. But if things break right, this team can get you a fair amount of wins. But if it breaks wrong, then we're looking at probably a repeat of last year. So it's tough. It's really tough to weigh. I think if we signed a DH, we would be in much better shape. If we got another back end of the bullpen guy, we would be in much better shape. But at this point, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. The one thing that could help us too, Jeff McNeil, if he bounces back like he normally does, he usually has that up and down thing in his career. I mean, a couple years ago, he was like a 5-WAR player. So if he can get us something close to that, then yeah, that improves the team right there. If Pete Alonso hits 260 instead of 220, that's a huge help. Lindor, he's been pretty consistent. He's going to give you what he's going to give you. Yeah. Nimmo's pretty consistent. We just got to hope he can continue to stay healthy. Francisco Alvarez, we hope a full year of Francisco Alvarez. He's not as streaky as he was last year at the plate. So
yeah,
there are places where this team, you can see where they can improve, right? But you can say the same thing. It's whether you view it glass half empty or glass half full. You can say it all on the flip side too. Like, what if Francisco Alvarez doesn't hit more than I don't know. He was under 220, I think. It wasn't pretty. But if the
No.
power's there and the good defense, then I guess you take it. But still, if he doesn't improve, that sucks. If McNeil doesn't improve, that stinks. So I don't know. It's hard. It's a cop out answer because it's like anything can happen, and it's baseball, and that's true. But man, you would love to have been able to plug a few more holes because that would have let you breathe a little bit in the case that some of these guys don't pan out. So who knows? And then there's don't talk about it enough, I guess. Edwin Diaz and his health. I mean, we assume he's going to come back and just be Edwin Diaz, but what if he's not?
Yeah.
So the outlook is it's up in the air. It's 50. It's like a 50-50 thing. Like I could see a world where this team overperforms, and I could see a world where it all like goes to hell. So I know that ain't much prognosticating on my part, but it's the truth. I can't lie. I can't just sit here and say we're going to be a 90-win team when I don't believe it. I think on the at our very best, we're a mid-80s win team. At our worst, we're probably a 70-something win team. So that's my little outlook, I guess.
and I think maybe I feel like too many people are looking at the 162 game outlook here as we look into the over-unders in a second after we get to Chris's opinions about this. We're looking at the 162 game outlook on this. I think we're not looking at the half the season prior to the deadline outlook because that's the important thing here. If we're going to the war with this roster starting opening day, you got to see how far this team goes by the deadline. It's not about the 162 game stretch because the Mets are in a position of a playoff spot or close to it. They're going to add to this team at the deadline. I'd be shocked if they wouldn't. David Stern is not going to let the team that he just put together die in the second half just like that. He's not going to do that. So I think we're looking at the 162 game outlook way too much and not looking at the 84 game outlook before the deadline. That's where I think we have to look at when it comes to the rotation, outfield, lineup, bullpen, whatever. So, Chris, I bring that to you. The outlooks on those, where do you think that you see the most improvement and where are your most concerns when it comes to those outlooks?
I mean, my biggest concern right now is for the lineup. I mean, we talk about situational hitting that was definitely lacking in 2023. I want to see the young guys become better situational hitters. I mean, I want to see everybody on this lineup become better situational hitters, but with the veterans, you kind of expect it. And from guys like Beatty, Alvarez, and Vientos, you're just kind of hoping for it now, right? We talk about the little things in terms of run creation, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be doubles, triples, home runs all the time, but you get a runner on second or third base, less than 2 outs, let's get him in and let's either drive the ball into the outfield for a sac fly and not strike out, or do what you got to do and get on the ground opposite side and create a run. That's what I'm looking for in terms of improvement in the processes. And I know that nobody wants to talk about that. Everyone just wants to see wins versus losses, and I understand that. So do I. But in terms of like how you get there to the wins and losses, you have to get the processes down pat. And that starts with situational hitting. Let's just call it for what it is. Averages. I know a lot of people don't like to use averages anymore. And I think that it is sometimes an overrated stat, but when you have a guy hitting 200 or anywhere close to that, it's undeniable that he's probably not doing well, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what that stat is used for. That's what it measures. So, but at the end of the day, honestly, my biggest concern is, to answer your question, is the lineup. See how those guys, like you said, Nelson, Marte, McNeil, how he bounces back. Like we know what what McNeil can be at his peak, but what are we going to get from him in 2024 on that new deal? My biggest concern, or my biggest, I guess, least of worries, I should say, is the rotation. I actually believe that Severino and Manaea are going to be a lot better than people give them credit for. So biggest worry. Sorry, I'm fumbling with my words right now because I'm thinking at 1,000 miles a minute. Biggest worry is lineup. Least worry is rotation. That's my answer for you. Bullpen is what it is. Like Nelson's been saying, it's been a crapshoot. It's going to continue to be a crapshoot. Hopefully Drew Smith doesn't give up many more meatballs, and we can just go from there. Because honestly, if I see Drew Smith groove a 97-mile-per-hour fastball right down the middle again, and someone just takes him deep in a crucial situation, that's gonna eat at me. And I think that his leash is very short. But Rob, I like what you say because honestly, this team is not going to look like the way it looks like right now next season. And even at the deadline, if these guys start to get out of that wild card race that we're all sort of hoping that they're in at the deadline, if Manaea and Severino are going to be doing well, like I'm projecting them to, in terms of bouncing back in their careers and what we saw from last season, then those guys are flippable pieces. Those guys are pieces that you're going to trade for those prospects. You're going to see a 2.0 situation like we saw last trade deadline. So am I rooting for that to happen? No, absolutely not. I'm not going to sell you on this team being an 85, mid-80s to 90 win team like Nelson said, because it's just not going to happen. I can't even see 85 wins. I know a lot of people or some people out there saying this team can be a sneaky 85, 86, 87 game win team. I just don't see it, man. I just simply don't see it. I say lower threshold there, and I will talk about over-unders here in a second, but that's my outlook for this team. Honestly, I think Beatty has a better year by default. It's very hard. I'll leave it at this point. It's very hard to follow up with a worse season in 2023, both in the win-loss column and in individual statistics, right? It's very hard for Alvarez to go back down there to the 210s in terms of his average. It's very hard to look worse than what Beatty looked at third base. Right? It's very hard for Marte to follow up even worse than what he was in right field. So I'm not guaranteeing that they'll be better, but those are tough acts to follow in terms of beating that performance out. And I think a lot of people, to your point earlier, Rob, don't realize that. Like a lot of things had to go wrong for the New York Mets to only win 75 games in the 2023 season. I'm not convinced that. Yeah. And I'm not convinced that we're going to see a 2.0 situation in 2024. So I think by default, we'll already be starting at that 80 game threshold. It's just about what extra gravy on top we can get from that. And that's what I'll leave you at in terms of the outlook before we get into Nimmo Bader and some over-under.
Yeah, and it's funny because like everything went wrong last year in 2023. Rotation, lineup, bullpen. There was not one thing where you walked into a game and says, all right, if this one thing does well, we'll have a chance to win. Everything went wrong last year, and they still find the way to win 75 games after even the trade deadline, when it seemed like the players were still busting their ass, the ones that were still on this team. And I see it like this. I'm more concerned about the outfield. I'm not concerned about the rotation. I think the rotation is going to be fine because I think people are down on Manaea and down on Hauser and down on Quintana. I think those guys are going to be fine. Severino I think is a hit or miss, and I think Senga's going to be perfectly fine. I'm worried about the outfield because they're moving Nimmo to left because they don't trust that he can stay healthy. Even though he stood healthy the last 2 seasons, the majority of his career has been injury plagued. They're moving him to left field is why they got Bader to play center. The outfield is a big question mark to me. I think if they're healthy, it's one of the best defensive outfields in baseball with Marte, Nimmo, and Bader. But they got to stay healthy. Like, there is a possibility that in May, not one of those guys is starting because of injury. Like, that's a problem. And that's what I worry about. And if the outfield is in shambles, that means the lineup is going to be in shambles. So I guess that's my second concern is the lineup. Is because of the fact that if the outfield doesn't stay healthy, I think the lineup's in trouble without Marte and Nimmo. And I think that's what we're going to be worried about. In my opinion, the outfield is my concern about health. So let's get to the last topic, Nimmo, Bader. We can leave Bader out of this, I guess. I think it's more concerns about Nimmo and his projections. And Chris, I'm going to start with you here. His projections is 269, 19, 20 home runs, 60-something RBIs. We talked about this before you went live. That's not good enough. He needs to hit more home runs if he's going to bat that with that average. That's not a leadoff hitter to me. That's not a guy that he's got to steal 20 bases. Like you got to pick up something with just that. That's not good enough. That's not what we need, in my opinion. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I like this little comment from Sanders here. Shout out Sanders saying Brett Beatty will grab the bull by the horns and become a good third baseman defensively and offensively. I like the confidence. I can see a bounce back year from Brett Beatty, and I think that we've been a little bit too harsh on him. But in terms of not harsh on him because he sucked, but I think that we kind of wrote him off and have written him off. But anyways, you know where I'm going with that. Nimmo, yeah. Fangraphs projections for him, like I'm okay with Nimmo objectively going more towards a power approach. I think a lot of people might disagree with me, but he hit 24 home runs last year. The on-base percentage was relatively consistent with what he's produced in seasons past. So why not? You got Harrison Bader now. You see the name to the right of Nimmo here on your screen. You got Harrison Bader. He's going to be your center fielder, presumably, if he stays healthy enough. And you can have Nimmo, who's hopefully ages like fine wine, because like we want to see this guy progressively get better while shifting over to left field. And I think that he has all the potential to do so. You look at Drew Gilbert also coming up, known to be more of a line drive gap to gap hitter. Like if Nimmo truly thinks that he can replicate 20 plus home runs each season, I might be okay with that. Now, there's something to be said for if we need that type of Nimmo and that version of Nimmo in the leadoff spot, which is why I've been sort of playing around with the idea of Lindor potentially leading off, because if anybody leads off on this team that's not Nimmo, I would be comfortable with Lindor doing it. But like I said, yeah, we need better than what Fangraphs is projecting. 19 home runs, hitting 269 is not what we paid Brandon Nimmo for, especially not the money that he's making to be a left fielder. So I understand that the contract in terms of when it was given was a whole different ball game in terms of the center field market and what he was demanding with Boris's representation. But I can start to see that now. Like I said, he's getting older. He's never been a stolen base guy, and he's not going to be that ever in his career for one reason or another, whether it's being scared of injuries or whatnot. He's not going to swipe those bags, even with these new rules. So if he really wants to stay in that box, hit for more power. We all say, like, I think we can all agree this team could use a little bit more power, right? How much, we don't know. We'll be lucky to get another 20 plus home run, 25 plus home run type player. I think Alvarez can be that. I honestly think Vientos can be that. And if Nimmo wants to change up his approach, so be it. But yeah, I think that we can start to see that trend in Nimmo, honestly. But if he's going to stick to his 2022 approach and getting on base and sprinting to first and working long counts and working 15, 16 type pitch counts, when he gets into that box as the leadoff hitter, then I like that version too. I'm really interested to see that though, because I think a lot of these projections are you have Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez being the co-hitting coaches now. What's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen there? Is there going to be any approach change, or are we going to see more of the norm? And MEZ, I'm not sure if you think that I'm nitpicking Nimmo. I'm definitely not at all. I think it's a valid argument to have here. Exactly what I'm saying. I'm challenging you to think about that. But because we can see definitely two versions of Nimmo, and we did in terms of the power numbers. But nonetheless, yeah, I think we need better than the Fangraphs projections. I think Fangraphs has pretty decent projections all across the board. I think that what they projected for Vientos, especially on our Interstate show, was definitely more in line with what he could definitely produce. I think that they're undercutting these guys just a little bit, but I think that's pretty common across all sorts of projections across all these websites. So, but Rob, like we said earlier before we went live here, 269 and 19 home runs. If we're getting 269, I mean, I got to see the power numbers go up. I'm looking at closer to 24 home run mark like we saw in 2023. So,
yeah, and Chris, since we'll try to finish this up, I know Nelson got to go. Give me over under is 82.5. Where are you going to go with that? And give me a number.
Right now, with the way the roster is, I'm gonna go under. I can't see them winning 83 games. I've said it all along. I'll remain consistent that I see 80 to 81 games. I know it's a two game discrepancy. I think they're gonna be better than last year. but I'm not confident in terms of creeping up to that mid-80s type win season. So I'm gonna go. I'll say 81 is my max right now. If they make another move or two, then I can see definitely them crossing that threshold, that over under. But right now I'm at 81.
All right, there you go. Nelson, give me a little bit of your thoughts about Nimmo and 82.5 over under, and give me a number.
All right, so I'm gonna try to make this quick because I gotta go. But
Yep.
like, listen, these projections, they're projections are projections. They don't mean shit. Let's be real. Like, they got to go out there on the field and do what they do. 269 doesn't sound great, but the last 2 years he is 274, so it's only slightly under what he did. They basically split the difference on his homers. He hit 16 in 2022. He hit 24 last year. It's what Nimmo's going to be Nimmo. If he stays healthy, stays on the field, he's pretty much going to give you the same numbers. I'm just interested to see it in his approach, and if he tries to sell out for a little more power, or if he reverts a little bit more back to the patient Nimmo. But at the end of the day, the results are pretty much going to be the same. The guy's a solid player. He struck out a little more last year than he normally does. I'd like to see him cut back down on that. He was at 146 strikeouts. Prior to that, he was at 116. So that's 30 more strikeouts. To me, that's significant. So yeah, if he can give me another 800 OPS season, I'm gonna sign up for it. I'm gonna live with it, and I'm fine. Like, Brandon Nimmo is probably the least of my concerns.
Yeah.
With this lineup, I do agree with your concerns with the outfield because health is an issue. Like you said, you got a lot of guys in that outfield that don't stay healthy or that have injury history going back a few years. So, but at the end of the day, if I had to guess, I'd say Nimmo outperforms that projection a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to go like above and beyond, but he'll be a little bit better than that. And as far as the over under, honestly, I'm going to take the cop out here and say they hit the number right on the nose.
Okay.
With this roster as is I can see an 82 win team. If we do by some miracle make a couple of additions, then I could see that obviously bouncing up a little bit. But like you said, it all depends on how the season starts, right? If the season starts like crap, then come trade deadline, they're probably going to trade everybody, and we're not going to see 80 wins. So we're not going to sniff it. If on the other hand, if they start out hot, and it comes July and there's looking like they could make a playoff spot, obviously David Stearns at that point is more than likely going to try to improve the team. And if he does that, then we can see even more wins. I hate to bring up 2015 over and over again, but that's a perfect example, right? We were somewhat in the hunt. Sandy Alderson said, screw it, I'm going to go for it. He brings in Yoenis Cespedes and Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe and a couple other guys here and there for the bullpen, and the team takes off and skyrockets, right? Did anybody see that coming? No. Obviously, there was better pitching on that roster, but it's just the point in that, like, it all depends how the season shakes out. And like you said, the roster could be totally different come the end of the year, and we could be looking at a totally different team. So who the hell knows? It's baseball. Anything can happen. We're all hoping for the best. But for right now, I say 82 wins. I say don't worry about Brandon Nimmo. He's going to be just fine. And I say peace out because I got to run. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys later. I'm sorry I have to jump out quick on you, but we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely. So yeah, and I tend to agree with this whole situation. Like, I think, I see Mike, complain that his team is not going anywhere. Well, I guarantee you nobody had the D-backs going to the World Series or even making the playoffs. The Phillies, who were one of the worst teams in the first half a couple of years ago, made the World Series with one of the worst bullpens and didn't really have the amazing lineup until they started hitting in the second half. We have to remember that we look at team on paper and we're like, oh my God, look at this team. Terrible. And I'm glad Nelson brought up 2015 because I was just watching 5 Days in Flushing about an hour ago. Right? Look at that team. And you tell me, were they a playoff team at all? Because they weren't. In June, they weren't even a good team, right? They were struggling. They couldn't hit. They scored 7 runs in 9 games. And I was watching 5 Days in Flushing. 7 runs in 9 games in 2015. It took Kelly Johnson, Juan Uribe, and Yoenis Cespedes to change the lineup. And we forget about it. And this is why I keep on talking about, stop looking at a 162-game season and projecting a 162-game season. What you need is a good first half from this team. You know how many of these players have really good first halves and bad second halves? We always forget about that. And again, we had 1 bad month in the first half last season in June. Why? We had to go through it, what we did at the deadline. If the Mets have 1 very good month in the first half and have around 500 rested a couple of months in the first half, they'll be right in the mix. Because look at the teams in the National League, guys. We forget about this. The Dodgers, the Braves, right? Pick your team for the Central. Because I can assure you there's probably not more than 1 team that is really going to be very good to win that Central. Maybe, let's say the Brewers, right? So you got the Phillies who are continuing to, lose in bad ways. They lost in the World Series. They lost in the NLCS. They got to keep it going. Their pitching wasn't very good last year. You look at the Marlins. Everybody don't expect the Marlins to be good again, or at least halfway decent. The Cubs really haven't done much. You look at the Cardinals got a little bit better pitching wise, but they're still a team that's probably around the 500, a couple of games over 500. They were worse than the Mets last year. And yet people are projecting them to have a higher winning over-under. So you got to remember, the National League isn't very good after you get past probably 2 or 3 teams that are top of the National League. So that leaves 3 spots for about 7 or 8 teams. And the Mets are right in that mix. And again, I go back to the Diamondbacks. I go back to the Cubs. I go back to the Padres. The teams that were third, fighting for the third wildcard spot, or even the second wildcard spot, they had 1 really, really good month. Look at the months by win total, wins and loss records. The Diamondbacks, they had a really good April, and after that, they didn't have anything really good until probably, I would say, September. That was their other good month. Other than that, they weren't very good months. The Mets had better months than them. The Mets dominated the D-backs. We have to remember that it takes 1 really good month and 500 months. You can't have a 9-10 game under 500 like the Mets did in June, because that really hurts you the rest of the season. Because look at the rest of the year. Look at the first half for the Mets. April and May were pretty good. June was a disaster. July was okay. If they had a 500 June, they would have been right where the teams that were fighting for that third wildcard spot, specifically the Diamondbacks, right in that win total. Because if they were 500 in June, guess what? That's an extra 5 or 6 wins, and guess where they would be at? Around the 500 team, just where the last wildcard team was, which was 3 games over 500. We have to remember that, Chris, when we talk about that, and I think people forget that. Again, look at the trade deadline. Look from opening day until August 1st. That's going to tell you where this team needs to be. You just got to be good enough to be in the mix at the trade deadline. David Stearns is not going to make his first trade deadline if the Mets are somewhat in it and break it up for his first season. He's not going to do that because it wouldn't make any sense. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
No, what do you think about this comment? I completely agree with you in everything that you're saying. And like I said, I mean, I agree with the comment here as well about Arizona having a little bit more of solidified younger talent than the Mets are currently strolling in with. But at the end of the day, it really is, your point is all about catching fire at the right time and putting together complete months. Even if something goes awry in June, it's about getting back and just playing 500 for most months. And I think that is obvious, right? Over a course of 162, and we talk about prioritizing the 82 or the 81, the first 81 versus the next 81. It really is about consistency. I think that's where the Mets have lacked. Even in 2022, they just lack consistency. They just could not keep up the pace that they were going at the tail end, and the Braves caught fire at the right time. And guess what happened, right? It's just it's the tale of consistency. So I think that's a great point. And John's asking here, I honestly don't know. This is a tough question. Better record at the deadline, because I agree with Drifter as well. He's been saying it in the comments. I don't think the Pirates are that bad this year. They started off hot last season and they kind of dwindled out. But who do you think has the better record by the deadline? Do you think the Mets or the Pirates have the better record by the deadline? Because I can see the Pirates competing for also a back end of the wild card spot, like
here's the
too.
problem. The Central is not good. So we're talking about teams that are basically 500 teams or worse, just like the Mets. And again, that's what I keep on talking about. If you believe that any of the teams in the Central are better than the Mets, then you're smoking something that I probably need. Because the Brewers, who basically lost their closer, they don't have Woodruff. Burns is on his way out, and they have Peralta, absolutely. But their lineup, where is their lineup? You know, the Cardinals were terrible offensively. They got older guys. You know, I'm sorry. What's his name? Shit, the third baseman. It's passing my mind right now.
Arenado.
Yes, him and Goldschmidt, right? Goldschmidt is getting up there in age. You know, we talk about the Cardinals like they're a young, skippy team, right? The Cubs really haven't done much. They did lose Stroman, who was very good for them, at least in the first half. You know, yeah, they did get Imanaga, but he's a question mark. They didn't really do anything with the bats. They might get Cody Bellinger back, but where did they improve? And we keep on, and the Reds, yeah, the Reds could be a solid team, but they also have to have their kids play well again. Right? We keep on forgetting the fact that, you know, a lot of these teams had their kids step up. Not just like the D-backs with Carroll, a couple others. Why can't they have a sophomore slump? We forget about, we talk about our guys, yet we don't talk about the younger guys who they have a book on them now. We don't know if they're going to have the exact same season again. You know, all they need to do is have one of their young kids not perform like they did last year, and they're back to under 500 team again. So, again, we keep on talking about, oh, this team is not good. Oh, the roster is not good yet. And I go back to 2015, and everybody's like, why are you comparing the Mets to the D-backs or this team? Because that's the teams the Mets are going to be fighting for the wild card spot. I'm not comparing them to the Braves. I'm not comparing them to the Dodgers. I'm not even comparing them, even though I don't trust the Phillies at all. I think the Phillies can have a 500 season or a little bit better, because they're just having, if you look at their season, you know, they were very good in the first half. The second half, they struggled and went into the playoffs. They got a little bit hot, and then they got beat by a Diamondbacks team that was not better than them just at that moment. And if we know anything from the playoffs now, if you're getting hot going into the playoffs, it's a tremendous amount of difference. Doesn't mean if you're a talented team or not. The Dodgers were dramatically better than the Diamondbacks. Why did they beat them? They swept them. Why? Because the Diamondbacks were a hot team. At some point, it doesn't really have to matter about talent. Now, talent gets you where you need to go for the most part, but you also have to remember that there's teams all the time that surprise people. The Mets surprised everybody in 2015. Remember, 2016 was supposed to be the year they were going for it, not 2015.
Yep.
We forget about that. And we're talking the same way now about 2025 as we're talking about 2016. We talk 2015 like we're talking about 2024. And I'm not saying, look, does everything have to go right? You could say that about every team in baseball. Every team in baseball, right? You look at a roster, you think they do over-unders based on a roster on paper being healthy. That's what they do with all over-unders. That's the way we project our win totals as fans, right? So we look at it in many different ways. Am I going to tell you the over-under is going to be, you know, the Mets are going to win 90 games? No. Can they do it? Yeah. If everything goes right, absolutely. If everybody stays healthy and pitches to their numbers, career numbers, yeah, of course. Am I going to tell you that? No. But again, we're looking at a 162-game stretch when we shouldn't with this team. That's the problem. If this team is solid or good enough at the deadline, if they make a couple of moves to make this team even better, yeah, you could see 90 wins or more. You know, we're looking way past the deadline here when we shouldn't. We need to look at the first couple of months of the season. That's where it's going to matter. If the New York Mets, well, okay, Mike, I understand that. But you know what? The Mets also got Scherzer, who was hurt prior to signing him, right? Verlander was good, but he was coming off Tom John not even 2 years ago, right? And the Mets were banking on Jacob deGrom. They were banking on other pitchers that had injuries as well. I'm sorry, every pitcher you got has injury concerns. Every pitcher, right? You want Jordan Montgomery, you're gonna have injury concerns. You want Snell, you got injury concerns. You want Mo, Larry, and Curly, they got injury concerns. If you're gonna rely on getting a guy, I can guarantee you there's an injury somewhere in his career that you're going to worry about. We're too concerned about that. We've seen young pitchers get injured. We've seen older pitchers get injured. We see younger players, position players get injured, and older players. The fact of the matter is that you project your team based on them being healthy, and then you adjust from there. But again, remember, 80 to 82 games prior to the deadline. That's where you got to look with this team. And that's what
I gotta say something about. I mean, we could talk about all this. I mean, we could talk about Dodgers, Braves, and then whoever the division winner is going to be, plus the wild card teams and who we're competing with. But this comment here by Joel saying, Steve Cohen's money was supposed to fix it, whatever it is, right? It wasn't though. It really wasn't. It's supposed to help, absolutely, but and this is what I don't get about people criticizing this type of offseason. The reason why we're in this position and we're not signing anybody is because we tried to sort of throw money at the problem already. The Mets front office has been in shambles, and that also continued when Steve Cohen took over, when he bought the team. That took over. This is the first year, objectively, that the front office has not been in shambles. And we're not going to see David Stearns have that flexibility in order to dig in order for the Mets front office, David Stearns, to dig this organization out from the purgatory that they're heading toward. When you talk about contracts that were stupidly given out, albeit at the time we were all happy, we realized that it was a short-sighted plan when you give older pitchers $40 million. Scherzer, Verlander, when you give guys like Marte $78 million, like, we tried to throw money at the problem already. And that's why we are not able to have the offseason that we all want right now. And that's why we have to talk about one-year deals being given out to reset this organization. So I understand people are upset. They don't like David Stearns. They're saying this guy's bringing a small market over to Queens already. You're wrong. He can't do anything else with the way the payroll's looking right now. Does you want him to throw $75 more million on top of what we already have, the $300 million that we already have on the payroll, for this albeit scrub roster for what $300 million should provide you? And sorry, this is a completely irrelevant and not related at all to how the wild card in the season might play out. I'm just talking about a front office perspective. Like, and I've been seeing throughout this whole stream, like, yeah, like I'm frustrated about what the Mets front office is doing right now too. But if you look at the years that Steve Cohen has had under his belt already, and we talk about, oh, but Steve Cohen has money. Why aren't we signing this guy, this guy, this guy? Like, they can't, because they already spent and threw money stupidly. And it didn't pan out. They pulled the plug on that at the trade deadline. And that's not something that you recuperate from in an off season. It doesn't take one off season to bounce back from that. Sorry, I had to go on a rant because I feel like a lot of people just don't understand that concept.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a rant right now, too, because of the fact that people are talking about, oh, the Mets are not showing a willingness to win. Cohen showed a willingness to win by spending money because the farm system wasn't ready. And he didn't want to trade the farm system to bring in better pieces to hurt the farm system more. What people don't understand, either you're stupid, dumb, or just don't pay attention. He spent the money over the last 2 seasons to protect the farm system because there wasn't any that was ready to come up. And to build up your farm system, you can't trade pieces away to get those pieces. So you spent on older guys. He tried to win but while building up a farm system. And people are like, oh, they're not trying to willingness to win. Well, spending a lot of money is a willingness to win. And I go back to the Rangers. The Rangers, prior to winning the World Series, were a losing franchise. Nobody wanted to go there. Guess why people went there? Because they gave them the most money. Just like Scherzer came here, Verlander came here, and other guys came here because of the money. Stop it about the winningness of teams, okay? They don't care. The look, Aroldis Chapman just went to the Pirates for $10.5 million. Does Chapman want to win? Or does he just want to play baseball and get money? The fact of the matter is, yeah, one, but the old bums, Scherzer for the first half was one of the best pitchers in baseball in 2022. Justin Verlander was coming off a Cy Young. So they were old, but they were still really good pitchers. You can't project them getting hurt. Sorry. You can't project them doing bad when they had good seasons prior. The fact of the matter is, players are going to come to the highest bidder. Okay? Looking at Yamamoto was a totally different story. The Mets were willing to give $325 million. They were given the highest bid. He just went to the Dodgers for the same price. You have to remember that. The Rangers were a losing franchise just like the Mets, who never won a world championship. So they weren't trying to show a willingness to win. A lot of teams willingness to win, but they don't go to those teams. They went to the highest bidder. They go to the highest bidder. If the Mets give the highest offer to a player, they'll probably go there. Right? If the Mets give $200 million to Blake Snell, he'll be wearing orange and blue next year. It's just that simple. If the Mets show $20 million for 1 year for one of these DHs, they're going to come here. If they offer a multi-year deal, they'll come to the Mets. Stop it. Stop acting like the Mets' willingness to win or the lack of winning means the players are not going to come here. That's false. The highest bidder comes. Why do you think Scherzer came to a losing Mets team prior to when he signed? Because they gave him the most money. Same thing with Verlander. Same thing with Marte. Stop that. The fact of the matter is, you're silly. Yeah, Joel, okay, but he went on a spending spree the offseason of 2022 and they won 70 games. They signed 2 shortstops for over $500 million. So that didn't work out in 2022, did it? Right? They signed Jacob deGrom, who didn't do nothing for them in 2023. So it was wasted money. You know how they won? Look what they traded for at the deadline. That's what helped them win. Again, Joel, get Chris.
Sorry, I want to talk about Emmy's comment to me too about when I went on my rant. I said they spent stupidly, yes, because. And I also prefaced it by saying that at the time, no one thought it was stupid because that's what they had to do. What I'm saying is they said stupidly, it was a short-term plan. It was throwing money on top of a structural problem that we all knew the Mets had. Was what? Cohen's 3 to 5 year plan when he first took over and that promise of a championship, and we had no organizational foundation at the bottom. And now we're starting to see that happen. We have a farm system. And someone said the Mets don't have a top 40 prospect. Yes, they do. They have 2. Their names are Drew Gilbert and Jet Williams. They're both top 40. At least according to Baseball Prospectus. And I'm sure that MLB is going to follow soon. And when they drop their 2024 MLB prospects, because they follow suit with either Baseball America or Baseball Prospectus, a blend of the two. So what I'm saying is that, just to rest my case before we hop out of here and give our final thoughts, to rest my case is that you had an organization that when you took over and you bought the team with Steve Cohen, you had a front office that was in shambles for many, many years. When you bought this team, the same front office under a new owner was also still in shambles. But you just had more money now to mask that front office dysfunction. Now you have an actual premier baseball mind that has done wonders with less in Milwaukee for how many consecutive seasons in terms of shaping up that organization, who's trying to get this team out of the purgatory that they're currently in by throwing said money and having that shorter plan, that short-term plan, and winning that championship as soon as Cohen took over. Because that's what we're trying to recuperate from right now. And we're sitting here complaining and acting like we don't know why we can't spend money right now. Like, it's obvious why the Mets can't spend money.
You know what kills me, though? They spend money and they don't perform well, yet they complain. When they don't spend money and trying to build a roster, they still complain. So you can't win either way. And yeah, Joel, I understand that. The Yankees offered $300 million, but they've made the playoffs a lot of years, right? They're winning, right? $25 million isn't going to make a break. So you just proved my point. He went to the highest bidder. The Mets and the Dodgers had the same offer. He went to the Dodgers because that was his preference in the first place. I'm sorry. I'm a Mets fan. If the Dodgers and the Mets offer me the same amount of money, I'm going to where I want to go. Based on money didn't matter. The fact of the matter is his intention was always going to the Dodgers. And that was obvious. He said it in his press conference. He could have easily never had the Mets in his sights if he didn't care about going to the Mets. He could have went to the Yankees. They were the finalists as well. So, and that's but we were the highest bidder. But again, if the same offer is there, what team are you going to go to? The team that piqued your interest the most. He said he was a Dodger fan. He grew up watching the Dodgers. Clearly, that was his first choice. So if the money's similar, of course you're going to go to the team that you feel like you want to be with. That's just that simple. It's very simple. Ohtani signed with the Angels. It wasn't really about money. So, and that's the whole point. Winning team, Joel, but the Yankees are too. For $25 million, I can assure you that the Yankees have a better shot because the Dodgers seem to choke in the playoffs every year. Just like the Yankees, right? The Dodgers choke every year in the playoffs. Maybe he wants to choke. I don't know. We'll see. So, Chris, final thoughts. You said about 81 wins for the Mets. I appreciate that. I understand that. So give me your final thoughts and let me know about what you're going to do with your channel, buddy.
Yeah, man, 81 wins. Like I said, if they make a couple more moves this offseason, like I said, I'm not expecting them to go crazy. I understand why they're not going crazy. I'm just trying to relay why they're not going crazy to people that are mad about them not going crazy this offseason in terms of signing those guys. All right, no, it's a long merry-go-round of thoughts and opinions that we're dealing with here, but honestly, I like the passion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I appreciate everybody's thought process and opinions in the chat. I don't agree with some of the line of thinking here in terms of, getting at Stearns for not signing players when you don't really want to acknowledge the root cause of why he can't sign these players in terms of how the outlook is. But if you don't want to acknowledge it, then that's your given right, and that's what it's going to be. So I agree with Jay though here in the chat saying Stearns is setting this team up for sustainable success. We all know that, and a lot of people are going to be eating their words on Mr. Stearns in the next couple of years. I believe it, but not many people have the patience to see that through. Anyways. Great chat. This is the point of the offseason where we're getting kind of crazy, right? Like we're getting all these thoughts and opinions. We don't have any signings to report on. So we have to go about what if scenarios and projections. And, we don't even have a full roster right now to sort of go off of. And I think we do see a signing here this week. Depends on what magnitude, but I think we'll see a bullpen piece at the very minimum between now and the rest of the offseason and opening day. So anyways, regardless, I appreciate everyone's opinions, thoughts in the chat. Us Mets fans, we're all Mets fans at the end of the day, regardless of what our opinion holds. Appreciate you all coming here, spending some time on your Monday night to watch us. CP New York Sports, Mets, Knicks, Rangers, Giants. I'll be doing a Knicks post-game live stream after the game tomorrow against the Nets. If you guys are interested, if anybody's a Knicks fan in the chat, it is full throttle basketball season, but a lot more Mets content on the way. We'll be doing more live streams and true Mets Talk podcast episodes this week. So stay tuned. And obviously, Nelson and I's Interstate Mets report on Friday that usually airs and starts between 3:30 and 4 p.m. So start your Fridays off right. Subscribe to the channel. I've been sort of interacting with you all in the comment section here. Trying to answer as many questions as I can here. The chats don't link up, as Carlos said, so my chat is strictly for my channel. I think StreamYard just does that in a weird way where our chats don't conjoin on the YouTube side of things. So anyways, I appreciate the support. Thank you everyone for tuning in. At CPNY Sports, Find me on YouTube, X, Instagram, all that good stuff. And like I said, yeah, more Knicks, Giants, and Rangers content alongside Mets content coming from me. I appreciate it, Rob. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So subscribe to Chris's channel, Nelson's channel, and don't forget about Hayden as well. He had a bounce out last minute because of something he had to do. Again, he'll be with us once again very, very soon. Subscribe to all the channels, guys. Another Mets hot stove in the books. We had a very heated conversation here today. There wasn't a lot to talk about moves-wise, but a lot of outlooks. And I think that's important to look at. And remember, guys, look at the first half with this team, not through the 162-game season, because that's not fair as of right now. You got to look at it through the first part of the season before the trade deadline. That's where we are. So, Chris, once again, always a pleasure. Mets hot stove is in the books. Everybody in the chat, have a great night. Let's go, Mets. See you next time, guys. Good night.
Let's go, Mets.
To meet the Mets, all the fans are true to the orange and blue. So hurry up and come.